Hi guys, in this lesson we will discuss about the right to data portability. Let me explain in more detail this right. So what is the right to data portability? What is data portability? This right gives individuals the right to receive personal data they have provided to a controller in a structured, commonly used and machine-readable format. It also gives them the right to request that a controller transmits this data directly to another controller. So when does this right apply? The right to data portability only applies when your lawful basis for processing this information is consent or for the performance of a contract, and you are carrying out the processing by automated means. Now, what does the right apply to? Information is only within the scope of the right to data portability if it is personal data of the individual that they have provided to you. What does provided to a controller mean? Sometimes the personal data an individual has provided to you will be easy to identify. For example, their mailing address, username, age. However, the meaning of data provided to you is not limited to this. It is also personal data resulting from observation of an individual's activities. For example, we're using a device or service. This may include history of website usage or search activities, traffic and location data, or raw data processed by connected objects, such as smart meters and wearable devices. So you can ask your car provider about your navigation history, for example, now. Well, that's fine. But it does not include any additional data that you have created based on the data an individual has provided to you. So, for example, if you use the data they have provided to create a user profile, then this data would not be in scope of data portability. You should, however, note that if this inferred or derived data is personal data, so the profile is personal data, you still need to provide it to an individual if they make a subject access request. Bearing this in mind, if it is clear that the individual is seeking access to the inferred or derived data as part of a wider portability request, it would be good practice to include this data in your response. Now, does the right apply to anonymous or pseudonymous data? Well, the right to data portability only applies to personal data. This means that it does not apply to genuinely anonymous data. However, pseudonymous data that can be clearly linked back to an individual, for example, where that individual provides the respective identifier, is within the scope of this right. What happens if the personal data includes information about others? If the requested information includes information about others, for example, third-party data, you need to consider whether transmitting that data would adversely affect the rights and freedoms of those third parties. Now, generally speaking, providing third-party data to the individual making the portability request should not be a problem, assuming that the requester provided this data to you within their information in the first place. However, you should always consider whether there will be an adverse effect on the rights and freedoms of third parties, in particular when you are transmitting data directly to another controller. If the requested data has been provided to you by multiple data subjects, for example, a joint bank account, you need to be satisfied that all parties agree to the portability request. This means that you may have to seek agreement from all the parties involved. Now, what is an individual entitled to? The right to data portability entitles an individual to receive a copy of their personal data and/or have their personal data transmitted from one controller to another controller. Now, individuals have the right to receive their personal data and store it for further personal use. This allows the individual to manage and reuse their personal data. For example, an individual wants to retrieve their contact list from a webmail application to build a wedding list or to store their data in a personal data store. You can achieve this by either directly transmitting the requested data to the individual or providing access to an automated tool that allows the individual to extract the requested data themselves. This does not create an obligation for you to allow individuals more, let's say, general and routine access to your systems, only for the extraction of their data following a portability request. You may have a preferred method of providing the information requested depending on the amount and complexity of the data requested. In either case, you need to ensure that the method is secure. What are the limits when transmitting personal data to another controller? Well, individuals have the right to ask you to transmit their personal data directly to another controller without hindrance. If it is technically feasible, you should do this. You should consider the technical feasibility of a transmission on a request-by-request basis. The right to data portability does not create an obligation for you to adopt or maintain processing systems which are technically compatible with those of other organizations. And this is GDPR Recital 68. However, you should take a reasonable approach, and this should not generally create a barrier to transmission. Now, without hindrance means that you should not put in place any legal, technical, or financial obstacles which slow down or prevent the transmission of the personal data to the individual or to another organization. However, there may be legitimate reasons why you cannot undertake the transmission. For example, if the transmission would adversely affect the rights and freedoms of others. It is, however, your responsibility to justify why these reasons are legitimate and why they are not a hindrance to the transmission. Do we have responsibility for the personal data we transmit to others? That's a common and logic question. Well, if you provide information directly to an individual or to another organization in response to a data portability request, you are not responsible for any subsequent processing carried out by the individual or the other organization. However, you are responsible for the transmission of the data and need to take appropriate measures to ensure that it is transmitted securely and to the right destination. If you provide the data to an individual, it is possible that they will store the information in a system with less security than your own. Therefore, you should make individuals aware of this so that they can take steps to protect the information they have received. You also need to ensure that you comply with the other provisions in the GDPR. For example, whilst there is no specific obligation under the right to data portability to check and verify the quality of the data you transmit, you should already have taken reasonable steps to ensure the accuracy of this data in order to comply with the requirements of the accuracy principle under GDPR.